Welcome back to ACG Practice Partners, where we bring clarity and direction for aesthetic practices. I'm Amy Anderson, and I'm joined again today by our senior consultant, Kirsty Jackson. Hi, Kirsty.
Hello.
We are going to talk today about one of our favorite topics, which is helping your aesthetic practice grow. I think every one of our clients and people we talk to are quite interested in growing their aesthetic practice. So I think we'll have some fun with this topic. So let's jump into it. Kirsty, if you're working with a practice and have to give advice about how to grow the aesthetics component, this could be a plastic surgery practice, a dermatology practice, a med spa that is exclusively doing aesthetics, and you want to grow your business, your aesthetic service line, where should you start?
It's the $1 million question, right? And it's massive. It's huge because it encompasses absolutely everything you do already and immediately sounds incredibly overwhelming. It's like, how do I do this? And you can psych yourself out so quickly. The answer for me, if you drill it down, is actually quite simple, which is you have to know where you're currently at. Like you have to know where your business is currently generating revenue or maybe not generating revenue. You need some factual data. We're not just going to start spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on energy-based device, throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping for the best, because industry has come out with latest kind of laser device or treatment or service. You have to know what works for you. So I always begin with the data because the data never lies. Like your revenue never lies. And if there's a medical component to your practice, your CPT codes or your ICD codes, they also don't lie. So you can look at diagnosis. I'm thinking for dermatology, say if you're thinking of like, what cosmetic treatment do I want to bring on? Maybe you run a report of how many diagnosis codes for acne that you've got running through your business. Or if you are looking at, your medical spa, you are seeing, okay, how many treatments of neuromodulator am I running through my business? You want to know your starting point. You want to know what you're currently doing. And that should give you a picture of where you could go, where you already have existing business to then transition into a new service revenue line. And ideally, you want a good category mix. So categories being things like, this is my neuromodulator, these are my fillers, that's under the umbrella of injectables. Maybe I have dermaplaning, chemical peels, and facials, and they're going to be under the umbrella of esthetician services. And then I might have energy-based devices, and that's going to be under the umbrella category of lasers. And then maybe you might have wellness, right? So you want to know what is in each bucket, because if say your injector happens to go on a leave of absence and all of your revenue is going into that bucket, it immediately cancels out what's coming into the business. So we're also looking for a healthy service mix, which is why people tend to want to expand as well. Mm-hmm. So the answer, kind of a long-winded way to describe, is to know where you're already at. You've got to truly assess where you're already at, and not just make decisions based on feelings or industry trends or what your neighbor down the street is doing. It's about you, your KPIs, and where you're currently at.
And if somebody isn't already tracking this data, if they don't have a KPI dashboard, where should they start? Is it truly just looking at revenue by service category, like you described? What are your neuromodulators bringing in, your fillers, your skincare treatments? Or is there a different way you would approach that?
I think a lot of that depends on how you're capturing the data, which is leaning into an EMR system. And I've been thinking actually about this a lot later. I think the future of aesthetics is not just going to be built on great providers. It's actually going to be built on great operators too. Like what we've seen historically is that the provider component has been exceptional. We've seen great leaders in the industry. It's really progressed it. And we're almost playing catch up to the second part, and people are not investing enough in software to pull this data easily and appropriately from their systems. So I do think that depends largely on what software you're in. But I mean, on a very basic level, you should be able to pull an Excel spreadsheet from your, like, the transactions of the day, your day sheet, whatever you're
Mhm.
calling it. You should be able to pull that from your system and filter it on an Excel spreadsheet and then track it daily. And that there are easy ways and there are more advanced ways. It just depends what your practice has to play with. If
Mhm.
we're going in and kind of looking at that, it's a quick, again, it's the where are you at? What do you have now? And without reinventing any wheels, how can we get you this information? So it could be anything from we're pulling Excel spreadsheets of the day's transactions to maybe I have the day's transactions pulling into some kind of dashboard, which that is my software piece that I choose to use, or maybe it's that I have an EMR that does this for me.
Mhm.
So depends on the practice, but there are lots of ways to scale up or down.
That's right. Well, I think that also highlights why we do really emphasize that aesthetic practices need to select an EMR that is designed for an aesthetic practice that allows us to put data in so that we can get reports out in a meaningful way, that we can track prepayments, packages, that we can assign service codes to a category, like you said, so we can look at things not at each little individual item level, but at a grouping level. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that could be a whole other episode talking about the software that we work with, but it is really important. And it's why we don't just, choose some out of the box, very simple, specialty agnostic software for our practices.
Yeah, and I would say typically, again, not to make this all about the EMR, but with AI and technology being at the forefront, and I think the reason it's at the forefront so much is because people are realizing, help, I'm stuck, and
Mhm.
I need easier, more efficient ways to do this. And they're kind of like, rather than assessing what they already have or making a robust decision straight out of the gate, because maybe they're trying to save money, which I completely appreciate, but then that causes problems when you're scaling later, further down the line, if that is your true intention. It's such an important choice. And I think that we could probably all agree there's probably about 2 to 5 EMR softwares out there that we would recommend
Right.
people be in and using. But it's usually an area where people like to cost save a little bit.
Right.
So, um,
And one of my response to that, and then we'll move on, is you are running a multi-million dollar business off of this software. This is not the place to cut corners. There are other places that we can cost save and be a little more frugal, but for
mhm.
me, my business, this is my software that's running my entire enterprise. It's an appropriate place to invest a reasonable amount of money into getting the right software that does all the things you need it to do.
I think so. And, having done that, my last practice I worked in, when I first started, we were a staff of 14, and
Mhm.
we had about 4 providers, and we scaled to having 11, and a lot of staff, and 23 treatment rooms and 4 procedure rooms, and we couldn't have scaled effectively or been that efficient if we didn't have the tools to be able to organize ourselves efficiently. So it is really crucial if your intention is to grow.
Right. So, staying along the line of managing resources, right? Because financially, our choosing a software and how to spend the money is a resource. But talk to me a little bit more about other resources that are so important in an aesthetic practice and why it is so critical to manage them tightly.
It's because they cost you money. So when we're talking about resources, we're talking about your staff, your providers. You pay a lot of money to have them there. They are a
Mhm.
resource. You have your rooms, your building, your space where you operate and practice. That is a resource that you're spending, and these are like non-negotiables. Like, you have to have them, otherwise you're not generating revenue. Then it comes your devices. So usually these are the big investment energy based devices that cost your practice somewhere between 100 and $200,000.
Mhm.
You have to ensure that you make a return on investment on those. So these are all things that cost your business money. Anything that costs your business money, that you need to function, is going to be considered a resource. So you don't want any resource just laying dormant. The obvious one is the provider that doesn't have a full schedule, right?
Mhm.
You don't want that. we often have people come to us saying, I need to get my esthetician busy, I need to get my PA busy, I need to get my injector busy. It's obvious because they're sat around doing nothing, and as the owner you're kind of like, no, I'm paying them to be here and they're not really nothing's happening, we're not
Mm-hmm.
generating revenue. Well, we forget about the rooms. Okay, so if you have an 8 treatment room practice,
Mm-hmm.
and on any given day 4 are just dormant, not doing anything, you're losing revenue.
Right.
You need to think outside the box. How do we turn those rooms over consistently and generate revenue from them? The same with your resources and devices. So, an energy based device, if you have 3 providers and only one provider's like, I'm using that device on all day Monday, well, are they going to stack their Cyton Moxie BBLs all day, every day on a Monday to have that device running constantly? Probably not. It's probably going to be, neuromodulator, BBL, neuromodulator, filler, sculpture, that kind of schedule. That because that's how what the
Right.
patient wants. And so you're telling me that your big expensive purchase is just going to be sat in a room for one treatment a day for one provider?
Right.
We have to think about how we are utilizing our resources effectively in order to generate return on investment. And I think sometimes people just look at obvious problems and they don't really analyze resource use.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always loved I love, to me, data tells a picture, and maybe that makes me a little nerdy, but I think it's important to know how much each of your resources is costing you per hour, per day, per year.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can really know, okay, here's an area of opportunity. It's a really easy area of opportunity. If we can fix this and bump this to a higher utilization rate, there's more income there.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than thinking, what can we do? How do we get more patients? How do we do? It's all part of that analysis and decision making and assessment.
Yeah. Well, I think you make such a good point about that laser that is sitting tied up in a treatment room, not being utilized while that provider is doing other treatments. And I think we see this happen all the time, or we see, this is the dedicated laser room and this is the dedicated injectable room. And there's a level that I like. I like the thought of like designing a room just around laser or designing it just around injectables. The problem is our patients don't really want treatment that way. Like we're often doing combination treatment. So I think we often recommend that the rooms are as versatile as possible. And the most efficient practice I've ever been in, oh my gosh, it was like a dance, like a well choreographed dance where the machine was in the room for like only the amount of time that the provider needed it to actually, do the energy device, whatever it was. As soon as she was done with that portion, she opens the door, slides it into the hallway, and then goes back to continue, right? There's a whole lot that happens at the end of the treatment to complete it. Meanwhile, a medical assistant or office staff is out there to scoop up that machine and take it into the next room or put it into the like little holding area. And they were constantly all day long moving machines in and out of the room. Some people freak out when they hear about moving machines around like that, but those machines were utilized like every minute of the day rather than just sitting in the corner of a room, sitting, plugged in and just taking up space while somebody else could be using it.
Yeah. I mean, there was a similar, we didn't move the devices because, they were concerned about wheeling them around the office and we were quite busy. But we did a similar thing where we made the device like a bookable resource on the schedule. So it was never double booked. And as soon as the component with the treatment and the post treatment was done, patient was out of room, next person came in, and all of the consumables needed for that treatment and service were in the room. So there are ways to navigate this, so it's not just, oh, this device belongs to this provider all day and now we're at the mercy of whatever gets booked on their schedule. If they happen to get 2 patients using this device, great. But it's usually not a back to back unless we're running a specific clinic for like, hey, it's laser clinic day. And, again, it's not how patients tend to want to book though.
Right, exactly. If only it were that easy. So, what order would you say practices usually scale their treatments and services?
It's usually the low overhead, low risk, inching to higher overhead, higher risk. So meaning that if you are maybe you're an injectable practice only, and that is a really easy place to start, because you buy your neuromodulator vial, you inject your neuromodulator vial. Those 100, 300 units, whatever, get used up pretty quickly. And so you're using your consumables per patient. So you're buying kind of what you need. It's getting used. There's no wastage. There's no attrition. It's a nice, easy model. So things that follow that trajectory tend to be where we go next. Chemical peels, another easy example of, I guess I can single out the VI peel as like a medium depth chemical peel that gives really great results, or the Wyco peel, the PRX peel. That is very popular, and it's because we're using the consumables as we go per patient, so we're not having to make this massive kind of cost investment, but we're still able to give efficacious treatments to our patient. And then things like microneedling, yes, there's a little bit of investment you're making in what device that you use for your, but that's probably going to be somewhere between a $5,000 to $12,000 investment, and then you're buying your tips, and maybe your some post care treatment to go with the product and service. But it's not a huge investment, so you're going to start there, build from there, and you're also building your service mix categories, and then you're going to eventually, once we get to a good place, we want to maybe consider investing in an energy based device, which obviously is a something bigger down the road. However, I also see a lot of providers when they're like, well, I'm ready now to bring on an energy based device or a laser, but they're like 80 to 90% booked themselves, and they're like, oh, my patients love me, they're ready for this. Okay, well, how are we fitting this in?
Mm-hmm.
Who's doing it? Who's running? If you're already booked and now you have a whole slew of new patients that want this new service, and you have to generate ROI on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that's not coming from you, then where? So at that point, we might have to start thinking strategically, are we even bringing on another person? So it's like a gradual drip, 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 but it
Mm-hmm.
tends to start with the low overhead, low risk consumables you're usually purchasing per patient, per treatment, where it's immediate. Like your return on
Mm-hmm.
investment is immediate. You're not waiting for it.
Right. And I think that's such great advice because the energy based devices are amazing and wonderful, but they are big ticket items. And despite what the best intended sales reps might tell you, you don't just buy it and it immediately starts churning out revenue. Maybe, I mean, there are some cases where people pay it off very quickly, but it's not a buy it and people show up. There is definitely a strategy to getting that busy. And there's a lot that can be done with those non energy based items, to your point, to start generating profit. It becomes a whole lot easier to invest in the big ticket items when you've got a whole following of patients, you've got revenue coming in, you've got some profit, you've got some cash flow that you feel really confident now that I can make the loan payment on that device. So I think that's really great advice. You mentioned that adding services, we might have to start talking about adding staff, right? As we're scaling and growing, more team members are going to be necessary. How do we find the right people?
Oh, I'd be a very rich lady if I could answer that question easily. It is another $1 million question. How do I find the good people? I think the market is just really challenging for like a few reasons, which could be a whole other HR focused little chat. But I'll focus on it's very real when they say, hire for culture fit and then train the rest. I think often we're looking for the unicorns who come to us fully formed, and they are the exception, exactly as we describe them to be the unicorn. They are the exception, not the rule. I also think that for me, one of the things that I always ask new hires is those people that can demonstrate that they have skin in the game. Yes, the pun is intended, meaning that there's something about this industry that they are already committed to. Maybe it's their long-term educational plans. Those people care. They want to learn, they want to grow, they have skin in the game. Maybe it's you're hiring a front desk person who is training to be an esthetician, or maybe it's an esthetician who wants to go, or an RN that wants to go to NP school. Those people want to learn the craft. They want to know how to take care of patients. They will be a much more productive employee. So that, I think, also a passion for aesthetics in the right way, meaning that they're not coming to work for you just because they're passionate about having nice, large, plump lips and they want treatments and services, but that they actually care about skin health and that they can prove this in the interview process. They don't have to be super knowledgeable. You just know it when you hear it, and they just light up because it's something fun for them to talk about. So I think a passion for aesthetics, skin health, also people who love to learn, because does this industry ever stop growing? No, it doesn't. There's always a new skincare line. There's always a new laser device. There's always a new treatment and service. There's always a new injectable product. That employee has to love to learn. So I tend to always ask those questions during an interview process. You know, what does good skin mean to you, or what's your favorite skincare product, or tell me how I said this the other day, actually. Like, this is not a pop quiz. I just like to gauge your knowledge level, but tell me a little bit about how you think. If I was a patient and I came in asking, well, what does Botox do? How would you answer that question? That immediately tells me like where the knowledge level is. And I don't care if the knowledge level is zero,
Right.
or they know everything straight out the gate. In the grand scope of how I'm assessing them, maybe they really like skincare and they told me what their favorite skincare product was, and their plan is to go to RN school, but they have no idea how Botox works.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough there for me to know, okay, there's something to work with here.
Right.
So I think finding someone who is passionate about aesthetics, loves to learn, has skin in the game, and can demonstrate that some way, that is organized and use initiative and is very customer service focused, and wanting people to look and feel like themselves on their best day. I'm looking for
Mm-hmm.
all of these things,
Right.
often within a very short span of time.
Yes.
But I think if you find someone that can demonstrate those in an interview, there's probably something there, even if you need to train them.
Right. Well, I think that segues into the question, if you're hiring another clinical provider, do you think, is your preference to hire somebody who has clinical experience, who has been injecting, or is an esthetician experienced with lasers and microneedling? Or do you prefer to hire somebody fresh out of training who, with a license, of course, that they need, and that you will train internally?
It depends.
It's our favorite answer, isn't
I
it?
know
It really
everyone hates the
depends.
"it depends" response, but it really does. So I would have to assess the needs of the clinic first. I think that there are some providers who are very adamant, like business owners who are providers, who are like, I want to train this person. First of all,
Mhm.
I have a passion for it. I love it. Maybe they already have a training arm to their business. I want to train this person.
Mhm.
Okay, so then I'm going to recommend that maybe we target some of the training institutes that
Mhm.
I know and I value and I respect, and who are their star performers. And maybe all they do is they're lacking experience and they're looking for a home. We're going to train and grow them that way.
Mhm.
So we meet providers who do want things that way, and we meet providers maybe also maybe it's a plastic surgery practice who is looking to grow, and the plastic surgeon doesn't, maybe their focus is the OR. Like, I don't really want to do injectables anymore. My focus is the OR.
Mhm.
Okay, so now we're talking about a provider coming in and potentially being autonomous and autonomously growing a non-surgical component of a business. Then I'm probably going to look for someone who might have a following, who might be known, who might have experience, because we want them to bring people with them, and we also want them to be seasoned enough to be able to and judicious enough to select treatments and services that maybe the owner of said business doesn't have an interest for because they're
Mhm.
focused in other areas. So that's what I'm saying. That like it depends does matter, and I'm not just saying that to be frustrating. Um, it it just depends on the needs of the business,
Right.
really, and that's kind of why we get hired a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we often say it's the stage of the business and who else is already there potentially doing treatments or able to train. So you may if you're a surgeon or a dermatologist and you are injecting now and you love to teach, I'm all for let's find a PA, a nurse practitioner, a nurse, depending on your state, that is eager and willing to learn, and you can work with a fresh slate. Some physicians really like that they're teaching them their philosophy and their technique.
Hmm.
There's others that say, listen, I don't really have a strong interest in it in myself. I don't really want to teach it. I need somebody who's already trained and confident. I think it's that clinical confidence to evaluate a patient, prescribe treatment, and do the plan. I need them to come in and have very little supervision and run with it. There's not a right or wrong, but you have to know who it is you need. Because if you needed that second one, that confident, ready to hit the ground person, and you hired the inexperienced who thinks you're going to spend the next 60 days training them, and that doesn't happen, like I think that's where we see the situations fall apart very quickly because we got the wrong skill set for where the phase of the practice is.
Yeah. Or and you potentially over or undersold a position to a candidate
Right.
who then is going to be very frustrated because they're like, "Oh, I thought I would be learning here." And
Right.
they're not. Or, "Oh, I thought this would be a very autonomous position where I would have more input over the treatments and services I provide." And it might not be.
Mhm.
So the fit is important for both sides.
I agree. Well, we will have to dive into talking about training and everything that goes into really training and onboarding a new employee in our next session because we're out of time, Kirsty. So, thank you for all those tidbits on how to just start growing and scaling your aesthetic practice. We'll pick this up again next time. Thanks.
Thanks.